Maine Democrats just nominated a man with a Nazi tattoo, a sexting scandal, and a physical abuse allegation on his record, and they did it anyway. Maine Democrats collapse as their own Senate candidate's Nazi tattoo and sexting scandal destroys their best shot at the Senate. I'm Brandon Mace. This is Political Lens. Stay with me, because one of their own sitting senators just called him a liar, on camera. The reality is, what happened in Maine's Democratic primary today is one of the most revealing moments in modern American politics. Not because of Graham Platner, but because of what the Democratic Party chose to do with full knowledge of everything that's on this man's record. Here's exactly what we're going to break down. The tattoo, what it actually is, and why his explanation absolutely does not hold up. The sexting scandal his own wife discovered and brought to the campaign herself. And the physical abuse allegations that even his own party cannot fully explain away. Let's start with who Graham Platner actually is. He's not a career politician. He's an oyster farmer from Maine, a former Marine, and about 6 months ago, he was completely unknown outside of the state. Then he got Bernie Sanders' endorsement, and suddenly he was the face of the Democratic insurgency, a grassroots outsider ready to take down Susan Collins, one of the most entrenched Republicans in the United States Senate. Now, Maine is not just any Senate race. It is a critical toss-up, the seat that could determine who controls the Senate after the 2026 midterms. Democrats had one shot at this, one shot at the most winnable Republican-held seat in the country, and this is who they chose. Now, before we get into the full scandal, let me show you the tattoo. Take a look at this. What you are looking at is the Totenkopf, the death's head skull, the SS insignia used by Nazi Germany's most feared military unit, the unit directly responsible for running the concentration camps. It was tattooed on Platner's chest. He got it in 2007, drunk, he says, as a Marine. And for years, when anyone asked about it, his answer was exactly the same. I didn't know what it was. Check this out.
There are some allegations in this piece that I just want to be kind of unequivocal about are simply not true. Anything alleging physicality, anything alleging that I knew what my tattoo was, these are the statements of someone who's politically motivated.
He says he had no idea. He says anyone claiming otherwise is politically motivated. But here's what the New York Times found after a full investigation. His ex-girlfriend, Lindsay Fifield, a woman who dated him from 2013 to 2015, 6 years after he got the tattoo, sat down on the record and said this. Platner not only knew what the tattoo meant, he joked about it. Let's break down really what happened here. Fifield dated Platner for 2 years. That is 6 years after he got the tattoo. 6 years of walking around with a Nazi death's head on his chest, telling his girlfriend what it was and finding it funny. Now, Platner's team immediately attacked her credibility. She worked briefly for a Republican campaign. She worked for the Heritage Foundation. Politically motivated. End of story, right? Wrong. Because here's the problem with that argument. The tattoo is not in dispute. It exists. It is on his body. He has since covered it up. The only question has ever been whether he knew what it was. And you want to know why his I didn't know story completely falls apart? Because Lindsay Fifield isn't the only evidence. His own behavior is. Think about this. You get a tattoo while drunk in 2007. For the next 16 years, you never look it up, never Google it, never think twice about the skull on your chest, a symbol so widely recognized that it appears in every World War II history book ever written. That is what he is asking you to believe. And the absolute kicker? He didn't come forward and disclose it himself when he started running for the United States Senate. The tattoo story broke through reporting, not through Platner being honest with the voters he was asking to represent. The sexting scandal. Shortly after Platner married his wife Amy Gertner in 2023, we're talking the very beginning of their marriage, he was sending sexually explicit text messages to other women, multiple women. His wife found the messages, and rather than hide it, She took those messages directly to his Senate campaign and disclosed their existence herself. His own wife walked into his campaign and said, "Your candidate did this." And what did the campaign do with that information? They kept him running. They kept taking donations. Bernie Sanders endorsed him after this was known. Representative Ro Khanna flew to Maine to campaign for him this past Friday, stood on a stage at a Get Out the Vote rally and said, and I'm quoting directly, "The behavior described in the New York Times story was wrong and toxic," and then immediately told the crowd to vote for him anyway. Now here's the part that is completely indefensible, because it's not just the tattoo and the sexting. The New York Times also reported physical abuse allegations. His ex-girlfriend, Lindsay Fifield, said that during their relationship, Platner regularly grabbed her by the shoulders, hard enough to leave marks. That during one argument, he twisted her arm behind her back, shoved her into a bedroom, and held the door closed. Platner denies all of it completely. He calls it false, politically motivated, and untrue. But here's what you cannot dismiss. Here's what you cannot explain away with Heritage Foundation and Republican operative. Take a look at this.
That there's more to drop?
Well, he lied to everybody. He said that there wasn't any after his Nazi tattoo situation. And now there's more and more of the things. So he's already lied about that. So I assume, it's like they say, for every ranch you see in Texas, there's 50 that you haven't seen. So I'm sure there's a lot of more ranches in P. Hustle's life.
That is a sitting Democratic United States Senator calling the Democratic nominee for Senate in a must-win race a liar, on camera, unprompted. Let's zoom out, because this is not really a story about Graham Platner. This is a story about what the Democratic Party actually stands for in 2026. The reality is this. In 2017, Democrats ran Senator Al Franken out of office. They forced him to resign over allegations of touching women's shoulders during photo ops and sending an inappropriate photograph. That was the line. That was the standard the Democratic Party drew for itself. And the person who led that charge, who stood up and said the Democratic Party must hold itself to a higher standard, was Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. That is the same Kirsten Gillibrand who, after the New York Times published allegations of a Nazi tattoo, sexting on a new wife, and physical abuse, looked into the cameras and said, "We're still doing Maine." The same party that spent years completely, radically calling every Republican candidate with any personal scandal unfit for office has now totally abandoned every single one of those standards. Because they need this Senate seat, they need Maine, they need to beat Susan Collins, and they have decided that a Nazi death's head tattoo, a sexting scandal involving multiple women, and physical abuse allegations are an acceptable price to pay for a shot at a Senate majority. And here is the worst part. He might actually win. Graham Platner is currently polling 7 points ahead of Susan Collins in the state of Maine. Maine voters, including Democrats, who absolutely, completely knew about all of this, went to the polls today and gave him the primary anyway. The truth is this. The Democratic Party does not have principles. They have preferences. And when those preferences, Senate control, political power, conflict with those principles, the principles go out the window. Every single time. Graham Platner is not a crisis for the Democratic Party. He is a mirror. And they absolutely do not like what they see. If you want to go deeper on the Democratic Party's collapse in the 2026 midterms, the fractures, the internal panic, and what is actually at stake in November, I've got a video on the end screen right now. Click it, because what's in there connects directly to what we just broke down. Drop your opinion in the comments below. Was Graham Platner winning this primary a genius move by Maine Democrats? Or is this a disaster for the party? Comment genius or disaster below. And we will see you guys in the next video right here on Political Lens.